Fundraising everywhere.
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 Fundraising everywhere. You need to add me in there.
Welcome to the Fundraising Everywhere podcast, your go-to place for fundraising tips and inspiration. Love what you hear? Get more insights straight to your inbox. Subscribe to our email list for exclusive fundraising resources, early access to training, special discounts, and more. Just head on over to fundraisingeverywhere.com/podcast to subscribe. Now, on to today's episode. Enjoy!
Hey everyone, it's Joe Waters, and I want to welcome you to How to Create a Lead Generating Partnership newsletter. I'm really excited to be involved with corporate partnerships everywhere again. Every year I use this time with them to present something new. I was thinking back about some of the other presentations I've done. I did a presentation several years back on audience-centric fundraising. I did a presentation with Kaz in Australia on case studies. That was a lot of fun. Taz dressed up as a superhero, and that was pretty funny. And then last year, I talked about corporate partnerships and AI, which I really enjoyed talking about. And I've learned so much more since then, too, about how to use AI with corporate partnerships. But the thing I'm going to be talking about today is how to create a lead generating partnership newsletter. And maybe for those of you, maybe it's your first time, you haven't seen me before, I just wanted to give you a little bit of information about myself. I am the founder of selfishgiving.com. I produce a bi-monthly newsletter on corporate partnerships. People say that I'm a cause marketing and sponsorship expert. I've been doing this for about 30 years now. And I'm actually the author of 2 books on the subject, Cause Marketing for Dummies and Fundraising for Businesses. I'm based in Boston, Massachusetts, so no doubt you'll hear my wicked Boston accent. And something that's really important, I've been a newsletter publisher for well over a decade. It's been hard for me to think how far back I go with newsletters because I started my blog Selfish Giving in 2004, and I started a newsletter shortly thereafter. So I've always trying to figure out that date. So well over 10 years of publishing a newsletter. And after publishing my website, selfishgiving.com, it's the second best thing I ever did. And I think you'll agree, if you start it, it'll be very helpful to you too. So I wanted to start by telling you a little bit about what I'm going to talk about today, give you a little bit of a roadmap. I'm going to talk first about the problem that a newsletter solves. Okay, what is the problem in partnership sales right now that can be addressed with a newsletter? Second thing, we're going to talk about the benefits of newsletter. We're going to talk about, is a newsletter right for you? And I think this is really important. You know, essentially a newsletter is a lead generation tactic, and there's lots of different ways to generate leads, right? And work them through the funnel. A newsletter is another way of doing it. And if this works for you, I think it can be really powerful, but it's not for everyone. Another thing that we're going to be talking about today is how to collect signups, something that's very important and unfortunately a lot of nonprofits put on the back burner. We're going to teach you how to create your newsletter and what the important sections are. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about sending your newsletter. You can do something as simple as sending it via Gmail or Outlook, or you could send it through an email service provider or use LinkedIn. So there's a lot of different ways that you can send your newsletter, and we can keep it super easy so that you could actually send a newsletter this week, folks. And then in the last part, I'm going to talk a little bit about what you can expect in return when you hit your stride with your partnership newsletter. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is I want to talk about why you need a newsletter. What kind of what problem does it solve? All right. So a lot of people, we have the funnel, right? The sales funnel or the partnership funnel in terms of how we think, people come into the funnel through awareness and they know about us. And then they progress to the intent stage where they're actually considering our organization for partnership. And then the purchase stage or the decision stage when they're actually making a decision about whether or not to partner with you. Now, I want to say right up front, I am not hung up on a funnel. There's a lot of other people that have a lot of different shapes for this. They have a circle. I've seen the bow tie. There's all sorts of examples. But I think what we can agree is that getting someone from awareness to the decision is a process, right? And there are different steps in the process. What I think a newsletter really helps you with, first of all, it does help you at the awareness stage in terms of people getting initially known to you, right? Or you known to them so that you're out there and they know who you are. So that's the awareness stage where they're getting to know you and you're getting to know them. And it can help you, especially as you get your newsletter going, because, if you're writing a good newsletter, I get most of the referrals from my newsletter from people sending my newsletter to people in their organization or outside their organization and them saying, hey, this is a great newsletter that you should sign up for. But where I think a newsletter really works is in the middle of the funnel. This is the intent stage or the consideration stage, I like to call it. This is when the partner is actively considering partnering with you, okay? So I think it's really powerful at this point. And let me give you an example of where I think this helps. You go and you meet with someone or you talk to someone via Zoom or on the phone about working with your organization. And that kind of puts them at the awareness stage, right? Now, where you want to get them is you want to get them to the bottom of the funnel so they can make a decision about partnering with you. But the truth is you got that big middle piece, right? How are you going to stay connected with that prospect between the time you pitch them and they say yes? And we all know that that doesn't happen immediately, right? It can take weeks. It can take months. Hey, some of us have been working years on corporate contact. So we need something in between, like a newsletter that keeps people up to date and educates people and motivates people to work with us. And I think a newsletter really does that. And that's one of the best things that you can do without picking up the phone every month and calling people and say, hey, are you ready to partner with my organization? It presents your organization in a different, and what I'll show you, a compelling way that could be much more effective. Now, the benefits of a newsletter, there are many benefits here. First of all, it builds trust and authority, right? You sending this newsletter over time that gets opened by people builds a relationship with them, right? It builds trust. They know who you are. And because you're talking about the successes of your organization and your knowledge of the industry, it's a great way to build authority. The second thing is it keeps you top of mind. A lot of people don't realize how important it is. It's actually a great quote out there. I think it's from Samuel Johnson. He said that it's more important to remind people than to inform them. And that's one of the things I think a newsletter really does well, is it reminds people that you're out there. So maybe when that company gets to the stage that they really have, they're ready to make the decision about which nonprofit they want to work with, or that they do want to work with a nonprofit, you're right in front of them because you're the one who has been presenting great information all that time. Another great thing about a newsletter is you can showcase your successes and impact, right? It's a great place to share parts of your case study. I don't suggest that you ever share your whole case study in your newsletter, but definitely you can put testimonials there. You can put snippets from your case study. So it's a great place to share successes. And I'll show you an example of that soon. And finally, it helps you cultivate and keep more partnerships. And the retention piece of this, I think, is really important, right? Because just as you need something in between the awareness stage and the decision stage to engage prospects, what are you doing with your current partners when there's not a program active? right? How are you keeping them up to date about what's happening with your partnership program and within your organization? A partnership newsletter is a great way to do that. Now, keep in mind, I'm not talking about specifically a newsletter for your organization, although it makes a great case to do that. I'm talking about a newsletter specifically for your partnership team. So think about it. Not only does it help with recruitment, but it also helps with retention too, which is really important. Now, one of the things that I want to get into is talking a little bit about, is a newsletter right for you? Are you the right person? And sometimes it's a person within a team that's producing a newsletter and not the team itself. But is your team, are you as a person the right person for a newsletter? And what I would say first is, I think people who want to write newsletters are a little bit more brainy than they are brawny. And what I mean is I think there are salespeople out there, they're willing to be out there networking at every event. They're willing to pick up the phone 30, 40, 50 times a day and make calls to people and make connections and stuff. But the brainy person on a partnership team really likes to think about the psychology of sales and how do I get people to buy from me? How do I become a magnet for opportunity? The other thing I would say about a newsletter being right for you is you do have to be voraciously curious. All right. And what that means is you have to know everything about your partnership program, right? And you have to know everything about the partnership industry. Okay. Because this just isn't about you. A good newsletter is about the industry in general. So your ability to talk about partnerships in general and talk about what's happening out there is very valuable for your prospects. So, Stephen King has this great quote in his book, Writing: if you don't have time to read, you don't have the time or the tools to write. And what I added there, you don't have the time to write a newsletter, right? So if you're not the type of person who is really following the industry and what's going on and what's trending and what other partnerships are happening, maybe a newsletter isn't the right thing for you. Okay, so I think that speaks to kind of the brainy side of people who like to produce newsletters. I know that certainly explains why I do a newsletter. I'm a voracious learner. I love to read. I love to consume content and information. And it's just critical, I think, to be successful with a newsletter. Another thing that I think is really important for a newsletter is you have to have a marketing mindset. Okay, and so what that means is, the funnel I talked about in the beginning. If you think of sales in the context of a funnel, right? Building awareness at the top, building things at the consideration stage so that you can gain interest and attention and move people through the funnel. Those things are important. And then the decision stage. So I think a newsletter is great for someone who thinks that way, who may be a salesperson, but is more of a marketing person in terms of how they think, because they understand that selling is a process and that marketing makes it easier and more effective to sell. All right. Now, not everyone agrees with that, right? People always say, hey, what the heck is marketing doing over there, right? But ideally, that's what marketing does, is it makes selling easier. So that's what you're thinking about, and you have more of a marketing mindset. And of course, finally, I think to write a newsletter, you have to have good writing and organizational skills, okay? Because you're going to have to do some writing. ChatGPT or any of the other AI platforms can help you with that. But you are going to have to do some writing, and you have to have good organizational skills, okay? Because hopefully you're publishing your newsletter on a consistent basis. So you have to have kind of that publisher's mindset of like organizing information, when publishing deadlines are, what you're kind of doing every day or every week to get ready for your next newsletter. So those are the 4 traits that I would look for in a person. And like I said, not everyone is suited for it. And maybe there's another lead generation tactic that would be better for you. But if you're nodding your head to a lot of the things that I just talked about, you're probably the right person for a newsletter. Okay, so first, let's talk about how you collect signups for your newsletter, okay? The first thing that you want to do is you definitely have to have an email sign-up form. Now, you don't want this email sign-up form on the homepage of your nonprofit, right? Because this is a partnership newsletter. So every organization should have a partnership webpage, right? That is part of your site where you could put a newsletter sign up form. So when people come and they visit that page, either through, after a few seconds or immediately, or, when they click on something, or even when they go to leave, they get a pop-up that says, we publish a partnership newsletter. It goes out, this type of frequency, sign up for it. And this is probably the best way for you to collect names. And what's great about this is you're actually collecting names of people who are basically saying, I'm interested in your organization. If someone comes to your partnership webpage and signs up for your newsletter, that's a warm lead. Okay, they're saying something about their interest in your organization. So take advantage of that. So an email sign up form is vitally important. And I can't encourage you enough to do not bury the email sign up form at the bottom of the page. Okay, put it front and center. If you go to selfishgiving.com right now and see where my email sign up page is, it's right in the middle of my website so people can't miss it. That's where yours should be too. Okay, so the second thing that I would add in terms of collecting signups is I was add a link to your email signature. I've done this with great effect. I mean, think about it. We all send out a ton of emails every day, right? Put something at the bottom that lets people know that you publish a newsletter that they can sign up for. There's a link there to the sign up page, and they can go there and sign up for your newsletter. I've actually gotten a great deal of traffic out of putting this in my newsletter and seeing people sign up. So that's a great thing that you should do. Two other things that I would do in terms of collecting signups, you obviously want to leverage any type of social media you have. Now, I'm not necessarily talking about your organization, because your organization is going to have a lot of different priorities for their social media sites. But if you have a personal social media site, if you're on X, or if you're on Blue Sky, or if you're on LinkedIn or something, put that on there. Let people know that you publish a partnership newsletter. That too is a great way to get a lot of signups. But I want to tell you, especially in the partnership space, okay, because we're not talking about, in many instances, a huge email list here, folks, right? You got to tell everyone, right? So what I do with my newsletter, my name is Joe Waters, but it should be Joe's newsletter. Okay, that should be my full name, because that's all I talk about with people. When I talk to people and it ultimately comes around to like my business or what I do and stuff like that, I always tell people I publish a newsletter that goes out every week that talks about win-win partnerships, right? So I'm telling everyone, and that's what I find is that you have to make that second nature to yourself, is that when you're out there talking to prospects, right? Ask them, could we go right now to my website? Could we go right now to the partnership page and sign up? Or second best thing, could I sign you up for the newsletter? Now, it's always ideal if you let them sign it up, right? But you can sign people up, but only with their permission. Okay, that's very important. So signing people up, asking people to sign up, and telling everyone, that you have an email newsletter when you're meeting with existing partners to let them know to sign up. These things, that's the way you're going to build your list. And like I said, at the end of the day, we're not talking about a huge email list here of corporate partners. I mean, if you were at a huge organization, it might be several hundred companies, right? But at a small organization, it could be 30. Could be 40, 50 companies or something. So you're not talking about a huge list. But whenever you're talking to a company, you need to mention the newsletter and mention the fact that it's not just something about you, but it's something that could probably help them. And we'll talk about that more in a second. Okay. We've talked about signing up for the newsletter. The next thing I want to talk about is creating your newsletter. How do you go about creating your newsletter and picking the different sections that you're going to include in your newsletter? Now, you can do this easily enough too, just by looking at the newsletters that you probably consume. Newsletters are really hot right now, right? Go and look at your favorite newsletters and see what different sections they include. But Newsletter Operator, one of the sites that I recommend to learn more about email newsletters, is recommends all these different types of newsletter sections. So what you can do is you can kind of mix and match, right? And say, okay, let's try this and this, let's do a short news combo with some brain candy, and then we'll do an intro at the beginning, right? So you can mix it up, but I definitely have an opinion myself on what three sections you need in your newsletter. The first section that you need in your newsletter is what I call an intro or a think piece, okay? This is if you've ever gotten my newsletter before, this is at the very top of my newsletter. I actually call it my note from Joe, right? And at the very top, I write about something. There are two different examples here. One week I wrote about, the funding cuts here in the United States and what partnership teams need to be doing right now to address those concerns. Okay. And then another note from Joe I had, or a thought piece as I just described it, was on trends in corporate partnerships. I did this at the beginning of the year. I actually included a webinar with it, and I talked about trends in corporate partnerships and what people can expect for the upcoming year and stuff like that. So I use the top section of my newsletter, not to just say, hey, I hope you really enjoy my newsletter this week, but to actually emphasize to people like, hey, I'm using this space to talk about something that's relevant to both of us and not something that's just relevant to me. All right. So I think that's really important, that you do some type of think or thought piece at the beginning. And we see these all over the place. Carol Cohn, who is considered the mother of cause marketing or the mother of purpose, she has a newsletter that goes out every week or every other week. And she includes a short introduction that talks about something that she's interested in, or something that refers to something that she wrote a longer piece in her newsletter. Triple Pundit is another great publication. Mary does a great job at the beginning of her newsletter addressing, having a thought piece, an intro piece before she shares all the different articles of the things they're publishing this week. So you want to do something like that too. Your intro wants to be a thought piece, something that is focused on something that's related to you, but not directly about you, okay? And what I actually wanted to share with you is some examples of what I would write about in a thought piece, because I think we really need to drive home the fact that it shouldn't be about you. Okay, now, every now and then, if you do your intro about you and you talk about your organization, that's fine. But most of the time, I really think you should be writing about something that is of interest to the person you're sending it to. Okay, so here are some examples of kind of like headlines of what I would write about in a think piece. Target, which is a retailer here in the United States, killed its DEI program, its diversity program. Why DEI lives on. Right. So a lot of people are struggling with this right now, especially here in the States. So, I mean, this is something that would be of interest to someone on the corporate side that's interested in corporate partnerships. Another example, 3 corporate partnership trends you can't ignore in 2025, right? That's for everyone, not just for you. Checkout charity is changing how we're adjusting our programs, right? Children's Miracle Network here in the States came out with a great research last year talking about, some of the big statistics around checkout charity and what's trending and what's happening and stuff like that. It shows people that, you're kind of on the pulse of what's happening out there. So you're using information that others are publishing to improve your program. Right? That's powerful to people. That shows people that you care, and that you're interested in their success. And of course, the last example I have here, funding cuts are real, how companies are stepping up to help. So maybe you talk a little bit about how companies have stepped up for your organization to help you, but you talk about how companies have helped other organizations too, right? So by taking kind of a broader look at the field, it becomes much more interesting for people on the other end who are just reading the newsletter. So what you really have to do here is you have to balance insight with self-promotion. Okay, insight about what's happening in the industry, what pertains to the corporate partner, with self-promotion when you're talking about yourself. And one of my favorite newsletters that I read every week, Jeannie Jennings at the Email Optimization Shop, she talked about this recently. And she said the 60-40 rule for emails, 60% of content should be about something that's interesting to the prospect, right? And not just about you. 60-40, right? That's pretty good. I have to say, most newsletters I read from nonprofits, it's 100% all about them, or it's 90% all about them. So think about this too. Like, how can you add things into your newsletter that are of interest to people on the other side that really engages them in wanting to read your publication? Okay, after the intro, another valuable place or another valuable section you should include is curation. I think curation is a hugely underutilized strategy for nonprofits. Now, what curation means is that you're out there looking for content that other people have created that you can share, that you can say, hey, this is something that you should check out. You know, I do this every week in my newsletter. After my note from Joe, I have partnership notes, I have marketing your cause, I have cool jobs and cause, and I have brain food. And so you can see the partnership notes section here, right? I'm sharing with people like interesting articles that I found that are not about my organization or selfish giving, but are about things that they are interested in, okay, that they can learn from. So you essentially become, like a curator. You know, where taste is important. You're saying, hey, I know this stuff, and I went and read or consumed a bunch of content these weeks, and these are the best things that I found. All right. Now, a lot of publications are doing this, but you know what? We don't see this a lot in the nonprofit sector. Carol Cohn does this every week. So after she does her note at the beginning, and then she has articles at the end, she says, hey, this is what the team is reading. Okay. And she has some curated articles. So it doesn't need to be quite as extensive as mine is, but it's good to include curated articles. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, Joe, this sounds fun, but how do I keep track of all these things? Well, a service that I use, which has a free and paid version, is called Pocket. Okay. And what you can do on Pocket will allow you to add a bookmarklet to your browser so that when you see something online that you like, or that you want to share with your audience, you can just click on that bookmarklet and it will save it in Pocket so that you can go to Pocket and then say, okay, this is the article I wanted to share. And what I like about it too is I can also tag it. So I have different sections in my newsletter. So if I think this article would be useful for the partnership notes section, I can add that. And you can see the other ones that I have there too: marketing your cause jobs. And of course, just personally, I have a tag for must read, things that I want to read more about. But Pocket's a great place to save your articles, so you don't feel like you have to have like 55,000 tabs open like I usually do. Okay, another thing that you can curate is you can curate your successes. And this was something that appeared in the Save the Children corporate partnership newsletter, where in this shaded box here, they curated programs they had done that quarter that they wanted to share with their audience. A great idea, right? Little snippets of information. And this not only shows success, but it adds credibility in terms of like, wow, look at all the stuff they're doing with corporate partners. So I love something like this. And then one of the most valuable things about curation, if you're using an email service provider like MailChimp or any of the other ones, it will tell you how many people clicked on that link. And I find this very valuable because when I see a lot of people clicking on a link, that encourages me to find other things that are related to that topic that they might be interested in, right? So it tells you what people are interested in. So you may put something in there and then you may look at how many people clicked on it and you'll be like, it didn't get a lot of clicks though. So maybe your audience isn't that interested in it, but something that maybe you didn't expect to get a lot of clicks did. So that gives you some information about what to share with people in future issues. And what happens is as you publish a newsletter, you learn more and more about your audience and how to engage them. Okay, the third part that I would include in your newsletter, in addition to an intro and curation, is engagement prompts. Okay, and what that means is during the course of your newsletter, you're asking people, what do you think of this, right? It could be as simple as something like that. So what you're doing is you're encouraging people to write back to you. Have you seen an example of this that you want to share? What are you doing in your organization when it comes to DEI, right? The second thing that I would do in terms of engagement, and I learned this from another person, is to give people access to paywalled articles. Okay, so I subscribe to a lot of publications because I'm a curator and I'm always tracking things. So what I do in my newsletter is that when I put something in there behind a paywall, I put a little lock at the end of the sentence. And what that says is this article is behind a paywall, but I can send it to you. And people will write to me after I send my newsletter out, and they'll say, Joe, can you send me that article? And I write back to them and I say, hey, no problem. Let me know what you think of it. And then I paste it right into the email and I send it off to people. This is a great way to build a connection and relationship with people around information. And it also shows you what that specific person is interested in, right? Oh, wow, that's the second time Jim asked me about that, right? So you can keep track of this information and it's very valuable. And again, this goes back to you being a service to people, to helping people do their jobs. And if they don't have access to an article, you can give it to them. Now, one thing I will mention about paywalled articles, if you use Pocket can be very helpful in this regard too, because a lot of times when you save things to Pocket, you can see things in Pocket that you couldn't see on a paywalled site. Okay, I think the publishers are starting to figure this out and they're changing that, but it's one of the values of being on Pocket is that even if you're not subscribed to the site, a lot of times you can see the article so that you can share it with people. Okay, and then the last thing that you can share in your newsletter for engagement is polls, right? I just did this past week. I did a check-in, a quarterly check-in with my readers and said, hey, how am I doing? How am I doing right now? And I went through each section of my newsletter and put a poll in asking them, is Partnership Notes helping you do your job better? And then I asked them at the beginning, how am I doing as a newsletter publisher? And it seems pretty good. 81% of people said that I was hitting it out of the ballpark as I wrote. So polls are a great way to engage people in your newsletter to get feedback and build connections with people. Okay. The next step here is sending your newsletter. And I actually think this is step 3, not step 2, which is at the top there. Sorry about that. So you have a few choices here in terms of how you send your newsletter. You can send it via Gmail, you can send it through an email service provider, or you can use LinkedIn. Okay. And what I did was I created this chart for you that shows you kind of the benefits of each, right? So the great thing about sending it from Gmail is, first of all, if you're a small organization and you're talking about you have 20 corporate prospects or something like that, just use Gmail, right? Yeah, you won't have all the bells and whistles and stuff like that, but you'll be able to get the job done. And the deliverability through your email will probably be excellent, right? And it's free, right? So you can definitely use just regular email to send your newsletter. The second thing, which is the most popular thing, is people, they sign up for an email service provider like MailChimp or Emma or HubSpot, or I use ConvertKit, or what it's called now is just Kit. And what's good about that is, you got a lot more complexity, but you got a lot more options, right? In terms of how you send your newsletter. And you get detailed information too, in terms of open rates and conversions and stuff like that. But it costs money, right? The more people you have on your list, the more money it costs. The good thing is a lot of you aren't dealing with big lists here. So you actually may be able to get it for free. I think if you go over to Kit, which is what I use, you can get up, the first 500 people or something like that for free. You may never get out of the free the free version because you just don't need it. And then finally, some people like to use LinkedIn newsletters, and it's something I haven't gotten into yet, but it can be very good. If you're a really avid user of LinkedIn, I think it's a great place to have a newsletter. It's free. Part of the downside is it's managed by LinkedIn. One of the advantages of using email is you own the list, right? Don't build your house on rented land. By doing it through LinkedIn, you're kind of building your house on rented land, but it can be really effective. And I do want to tell you, if you are interested in setting up a LinkedIn newsletter, email me at joe@selfishgiving.com. Again, joe@selfishgiving.com. I'll send you a great article I just read on someone who did it very successfully. And I think you'll really enjoy it. The second thing that I would do in your newsletter is I would put your name on it, right? So when you, when you send your newsletter out to people, make sure it has your name on it. That comes from a real person. Again, that is probably the most important thing over time. I do not understand these people that have no reply emails, right? You can't reply to the email, right? So definitely have your name in there. And who it's coming from. It should be coming from a real person. The other thing about sending your newsletter is the subject line has to pop, okay? And I'll tell you, we could do a whole webinar on writing great email subject lines, but let me just tell you folks, we need to do a better job. I'm getting emails from nonprofits that say this month's email newsletter, okay? I get 300 emails a day, right? I have to go through all those. When you have a compelling subject line, that makes it more likely that I'm going to open it. And one of the things that can also help in your subject line is using what's been called a brand emoji. See how I got the two emojis here? One of them is the devil and the other is the angel. Well, that's my symbol for selfishgiving.com. Okay. So when people get this in their inbox, my email is coming from a real person. It's coming from Joe Waters. And see how it kind of sticks out a little bit, right? It gets people's attention. Or people that get my newsletter every other week, they'll be looking for it. So when they see it, they say, oh, I see Joe's newsletter in my inbox here, right? So a brand emoji can make a big difference in whether or not people open your email. But have it come from a real person and have a good subject line, something that's related to why the prospect should open it. And then the final point about sending your newsletter is you have to be frequent and consistent. What is the right frequency for a newsletter? I'm not sure. I don't think it's quarterly, though. I don't think that's enough. I think you need to build a reading habit with people. So I think you need to send it out at least once a month, if not every 3 weeks or every 2 weeks, right? You have to be frequent enough that you're building a habit with people where they're looking forward to it, they're reading your information. And sometimes I think if you just go quarterly, it's just not frequent enough. But that being said, if you wanted to do it quarterly, just make sure that newsletter is awesome. That is the thing that's going to get people to open it and even look forward to it every quarter. And then the other part, and this is part of the slog of writing a newsletter, you have to be consistent, right? 90% of you will never try what I'm suggesting today, right? 5% of you will try, but maybe only send out one issue. And then 2% of you will send out 10 issues and then quit. And then just a small percentage of people on the call today will send out that newsletter every week or every other week for months and for years. And those are the people that are going to reap the benefits of doing a newsletter. Success comes from what you do, not from what you do occasionally, but what you do consistently. Okay, so what to expect in return? First, you're going to establish authority and expertise with people. You're going to strengthen relationships with people. You're going to gain valuable insights from people as they get back to you. And you're going to drive recruitment and retention. I think there could be an argument that you should do a partnership newsletter just for your existing partners, right? Because it's going to be so beneficial to them. But you can also use it for prospects. So these are the things that you can expect in return from that. So finally, these are the things that we talked about today. The problem a newsletter solves, it helps you between that awareness and decision stage, the benefits of a newsletter, who should be writing a newsletter. I hope you're the brainy sort, just like I am. Collecting signups, creating your newsletter, sending your newsletter, and what to expect in return. The final thing that I wanted to leave you with is some great resources on newsletter. My friend Ephraim Gopin in Israel writes a great newsletter called 1832 Communications. It's on nonprofit email. Take advantage of it and sign up. Send It Right is another great email newsletter that addresses deliverability. How do you get into people's inboxes and get them to open your emails? The Inbox Collective, written by a guy, Dan Ochinsky, It's a great newsletter on newsletters. Another great one that I already mentioned, Newsletter Operator, and then Email Op Shop is another great example of an email newsletter that talks about emails. So those are some great resources for you. So my name is Joe Waters. I'm from selfishgiving.com. Again, I publish a newsletter every other week that talks about win-win corporate and nonprofit partnerships. And I want to encourage you, if you have any questions about today's presentation, don't hesitate to contact me at joe@selfishgiving.com. Thank you very much. It's great to be back here again this year. Take care.